And I'm gonna start recording this, and I make this public on our YouTube page, which is MCCC FUN service. So there's the first link. And here's the second link as a just in case, just for everyone, because like I said, I have to do a funeral, or not a funeral, a parent teacher thing tonight, which I'm not super happy about. They changed the date on the test. The test is normally the third Friday of every, like in October or in February or in July, and they went and they switched it on us. And so yeah, it snuck up on us a little bit. I got my scheduling a little messed up, but I'm going to get through as much as I can with you guys tonight.
I said, go play on the court.
Don't mind my kids fighting in the background. That's just par for the course. And you've got a 5 and a 3-year-old. So anyway, these are the notes that I put up there. And these are ones that you can absolutely see. And I don't know why this is giving me a weird. I had a meltdown with my computer. And oh, come on, would you just work for me? I had a complete meltdown on my computer. And let me stop sharing and start trying to share again. So I had a complete meltdown on my computer, and it's not working for me. I had to actually give it to the tech people to get them to work on it. But the whole thing just completely crashed on me. So if anybody's emailed me in the last week and a half, I haven't gotten it because I cannot access anything. It's a mess.
Mr. Daly, I have a question.
Sure, go right ahead.
Yeah, so how do you know if your JP review is outdated information?
Well, it's based off of the JP review. It's just based off of, the current regulations and rules. We have no way of knowing what's on the test, the same way we have no way of knowing what's on the national board exam. We just have to take it from the curriculum that we're given. Why do you ask?
Because I failed it a couple times, and it seemed like when I went to Mortuary, I'm talking about the JP exam, and I read the statutes, I read the 99 pages, I read the regulations and things of that nature, and it seems as though the exam doesn't line up with things I'm studying as far as pricing and if an intern is removed. Like, we don't get them simple questions. It's a lot of scenario based, and if I'm honest with you, it seemed like a daggone arts exam, the arts MBE.
Sure, I got you.
Finding this pattern with the national board exam that I failed too, where it seemed like my mortuary school and what's going on at the conference are two different worlds. And I'm like, well, hold up. Am I wrong, or is something wrong? That's all. I was just asking.
No, I got you. And it's a good question. And there's two different answers to that, because at a state level, we've had, personally, from Mercer's perspective, we've had a very good success rate with the passing rate. We've maintained somewhere in the 90s the whole time. And I'm not sure where you went to school. But I find the schools outside of the state are not as honed in on New Jersey rules and regulations, just because they have a larger, broader.
I went to a Pennsylvania school, so yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, where did you go?
Pittsburgh Institute.
Okay, and it's a wonderful program, but it's not as focused on New Jersey regulations. So what we try and do, and again, with the NBE in particular, they're bonkers right now. In 2013, there was that whole debacle that happened where they went into AAMI, McAllister, and they were collecting questions and giving them out to students, and it was a mess. And what happened was the conference really locked down on everything. Not that people were cheating before. I mean, that one program was found to be cheating, but you know, they just went crazy with it, and they dumped a bunch of their questions and really got guarded on it. I volunteered to write questions back in 2019 and did so. I spent a week doing so, or 4 days or whatever it was. And they were saying even the questions that we wrote would be changed. So we wouldn't even notice. We wouldn't even, they would take the breadth of the question and rewrite it so that even we wouldn't know what those questions were. Now, at a state level, it's much different in that they're not as bonkers as the conferences with the national board exam, but with the questions on there, if you didn't have a class specifically outlining New Jersey regulations, it's hard to pass the test because it is a hard exam. I remember taking the exam 20 years ago, and I thought it was more difficult than the national was. So, Letha, you're asking what the YouTube channel is. It's MCCC FUN service. And thank you, Bill. You put that in there, and what I do is I record these, I make these public. Like I said, I unfortunately, and this is a fault on me, as my wife pointed out to me a number of times tonight, that we have the quote unquote teacher parent conference tonight. So we have to be there at 7. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get as much into this as I can. I'm going to give you guys a link, which I already put up there, which is a previous recording of this. I'm going to record this. I will post this. I make these public. I make all of the sources public. The sources in that they, you know, the let me close that out. The notes that we'll be going over. Yeah, it's one of those deals where I sort of screw the pooch on that one and scheduled too many things in one night. So if you are taking the jurisprudence exam, it's going to be given at the college at Mercer. It has nothing to do with us. It just happens to be Mercer is geographically centered in the state. So they have a contract with the state board. This thing working. Like I said, this is a new computer. It's my computer completely just shit the bed, and just I have it at the tech people have it. I was lucky to even I had to redo these slides today just because the thing just died on me. So for reference purposes, this is where you find all of these. You can take these and drop them right in. But if you go to the state board's website, you can get both the statute and you can get the regulations. All of them are listed there. Download them, look them over, read them. This is where it all comes from. When you're tested, this is where it all comes from. This is where other areas come from: health and vital statistics, corporate names, medical examiner, advanced funeral payments, trust accounts. And you're not going to be asked on these numbers. Oh, well, what is NJSA 52? You're going to be asked on that, but you're going to be asked you're going to ask questions from that material. So it's good to download that information and take a look at it. You can just highlight it, Google it, drop it in, take a look at it. Now, I would take the majority of the time and look at the regulations specifically for funeral service and the statutes specifically for funeral service, but this is where it all originates. So simple concepts, I got to drop, there it is, okay. Simple concepts, which are just good to keep in mind: a license for the individual, certificate of registration, or a COR is for the funeral home, and when you need to reinstate them, how much it costs to reinstate them, And we'll go through that, odd years, even years, things like that. A death certificate versus burial permit versus transit permit. And remember, it's a simple concept in New Jersey where I think it should be more involved, but it's not, where you can just take a burial permit and click, I am transferring somebody via common carrier, and all of a sudden becomes a transit permit. Like you don't have to go through a health department or anything like that. You just click a button, boom, good to go. So remember what a license is required for. It's required to arrange and pre-arrange. You can't make pre-arrangements without a license. You can't make arrangements without a license. In some states, it's not like that. To sell merchandise and to sign forms, if you're going to sign a statement of funeral goods and services, then you need to have a license to do so. You need to have a license to sign a death certificate. You need to have a license to embalm. You need to have a license at disposition. Anywhere where you take somebody where they're being disposed of, where the body is, being permanently disposed, whether that be burial or cremation or whatever, you need a license to do so. Now, this has been relaxed during the pandemic. And my guess would be you'll see less questions about this, but by the letter of the law, you need to have a license to drive somebody to the crematory. You need to have a license to drive somebody to the cemetery. It's absolutely required of you. As far as supervising visitation, dressing or casting or removal, no, you don't need a license to do so. You can supervise visitation without having a license. You can dress and casket without a license. You can do a removal without a license. It's not the same in every state. Like in Delaware or New York, for example, you need to have a license to do a removal. Just not the case in New Jersey. If you're driving someone, for example, and we ran into an issue with this once. Personally, we ran into an issue with this once where we had somebody drive a body up to New York to be shipped out. And they're like, no, you need a license here. We're like, well, it's not really the point of disposition, but they considered it the point of disposition. But if you were driving a body to, let's say, Newark airport, and you're having them shipped out to another country, you do not need a license for that. You can be an intern, you could be somebody that works at a funeral home. It's fine to do so. It's in the statutes and in the regulations, it does not require that. So license renewal, easy questions if they come up. Biannual, both the funeral home and the individual have to renew their license every other year. Now, for the funeral home, it's on even years, and for the individual, it's on odd years, right? So I re-upped in 2021. I'll have to re-up in 2023. I always remember this by every funeral director I know is an oddball. That's just the way that I remember it. Just one of those simple little mnemonics that you can help. I guess it's not mnemonic, but one of those little tricks you can use to remember. So renewal expectations, you have to have the continuing education, you have to have the 10 credits, and we'll talk about that a little bit more here in a minute. But it's every year I see so many people get fined over this because they send them a letter saying, prove to us that you have renewed your credits, and so many people have not, and they get popped on it. It happens every other year. It's one of those things that I always and I shouldn't say I look forward to, but I always look at the state board minutes on that particular month to see who got popped on it. And again, I don't look forward to it, but I do this out of curiosity look. So license lap, renewal requirements, time issues. Now, with a lot of these things, I do not put, normally if you had me in class for laws, rules, and regulations, I have all of that data down there, and I can read it all off my Surface and just, the little Surface tablet and read it and tell you. I specifically do not put this on here to have you look it up so that you can look it up, you can review it, and it'll help you remember it. There are renewal requirements outside of 5 years. Things change, and it's good to Actually, they've changed that a little bit, but within those first 5 years, let's say if you let your license lapse, there's certain things that are required of you. And I specifically do not include some of this information in there just so you will look it up. And again, if you haven't done so, just go to the state board's website. Right on the website, New Jersey State Board of Mortuary Science. You can download both the rules and the regulations and all of the information in there. There's a lot to review, but I'm just trying to help you. I'm just trying to help forward where you're going to spend your time reviewing. All right, continuing education courses, programs must be approved by the board. New for 2019. In 2019, they changed a bunch of things. There's the sunset regulation, which says after so many years, every 7 years, right? There's that sunset of 7 years. They have to look back on all the regulations and go, okay, are these still current? Do we need to change anything? In 2019, they changed a ton. So as of 2019, pre-need providers must monitor attendance and ensure completion of the lessons, meaning that you go to a continuing ed conference and you have to they like with the association, with the state association, they'll give you the what do they call it, the little thing you have to wear, and when you go out they scan it, and if you're gone for more than 10 minutes then it counts again. You can't take account for that particular class. They've done this for a long time. It used to be 15 minutes, but they've now really solidified it that you have to, whoever is providing that pre-need education, you must ensure that the people there are actually there the whole time. CEU instructor must maintain records for 5 years. So if you ever teach a class, if you ever do anything like that, you have to maintain those records for 5 years. And the state is big on numbers when it comes to testing purposes. And again, this is silly stuff for them to do, but how long do you have to keep a record? How long do you need to keep, a record for a funeral or for pre-need or for medical records, or for if you're a CEU provider, they make a big to-do over that. So it's always good to remember the numbers on these things. All right, so as of 2019, I kind of doubt you'll see any questions about this. I talked to my predecessor, Mr. Smith, about this when they changed so many things in 2019, and said, when do you think this is going to affect the test? And he was like, normally it's about 2 years for any changes to really get in, to impact the JP exam. 2020 threw everybody for a loop. And so I don't know if you're going to see anything about this or not, but inactive licenses are gone. It used to be you could have an inactive license, so you didn't have to take the CEUs anymore, but you could not do funerals, you couldn't do funeral arrangements, you couldn't embalm, but you could still be included in advertising. So, grandfather is there and he's 87 years old, and they're just, his son and grandson or granddaughter or whomever are running the show, and they just want to keep him in the advertising. Yeah, he's still a funeral director here. Great. They've done away with that altogether. So that's just gone. You're either a funeral director or you're not. They used to have an inactive option wherein you could still be included in advertising and part of the show of funeral service, but they weren't actually able to do anything at the funeral home, and they've since done away with that. Again, more that's been done away with in 2019. License restoration, less than 5 years, complete all delinquent continuing education, up to 25 hours, blah, 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 blah. Now what they require is, if, let's say you've been out for 4 years and for whatever reason you decide I want to get back in a funeral service, they only require the fees and the CEUs for the current and previous licensing period. So if you've been out for 5 years, you don't have to make up the full 25 hours. You only need to make up your current and your previous, which would be 20 hours. Not saving a lot, they're dropping 5 hours off, but and as far as the fees, it's the same thing. You just need to pay the current and the previous fees on those. And again, this is all the minutia that makes up you know, what they'll test you on, stuff that really doesn't matter as far as being like a good funeral director, but you know. So lapse more than 5 years. Now here's a real weird gray area. The New Jersey State Board will decide applicants on a case-by-case basis. So it used to be if you were out 6 years and you come back, they go, oh, okay, you got to do a mini internship, 3 months to 1 year, depending on what we decide. You have to do 25 bombings, funeral arrangements, retake the jurisprudence exam, and the practical. Now they just go, well, on a case-by-case basis, we'll decide. And I think what they're doing is if somebody's out 6 years, they'll act one way. If somebody's been out 15 years, they'll act another, but they've just left it open-ended. It's not codified the way that it was before. All right, so things to know about, things to look up: record keeping. You need to know how long a funeral home has to keep records. And again, the short answer is you need to have 1 year of records immediately, 6 years of records within 2 weeks, or the additional 6 years within 2 weeks, meaning 7 years in total. I phrased that poorly. So the inspector shows up, they go, we want to see records. Okay, the first year you need to have immediately. The 7 years total, the additional 6 years you need to have within 2 weeks. You can store them off premise if you decide to, if you want to have a storage facility somewhere. And every funeral home I've ever been in has like 60 years of records all right there. But in theory, you could have a storage area somewhere where you have these records stored. Now, it's important to look at both the funeral home record keeping, cemetery record keeping, and crematory record keeping, because they may ask you about that. And there is a difference between them. All of that is within the regs. Just take a look at it, and it's all right there. It's things like, you know, like for example, a crematory needs to keep a record of the funeral home they dealt with, the date of death, the date of the cremation, the disposition of the cremated remains, meaning did they give them to the funeral director? Did they give them to a family? Did they mail them to a family? Did they take them out to sea and scatter them on the family's behalf? Like there's a whole bunch of things involved in that. Itemization. And itemization in FTC is sort of the same thing. The idea that you can't just charge somebody for a casket. Years ago, my father was licensed in, I think in 1960, 59 or 60. And in those days, you would just charge somebody for a casket, and there was a 3 times markup. So somebody pays, I'm going to make up a number here, $1,000. Let's say the casket costs $1,000. The markup would be to $3,000, and that paid for everything on a funeral. It's not the case now. You need to itemize everything on a funeral. You can't just have, even if you have a package, even if you have a funeral package that discounts the price, you need to itemize everything and then discount it down. Meaning you have the basic services, funeral director and staff, the removal, embalming, whatever, the casket, the vault. But since this package, we're going to discount it by $500, let's say. You need to have all of that laid out on the paperwork. It can't just be, yeah, it's our gold package. It's $6,000 versus $7,500 or whatever it is. Prep room expectations. And again, this is all laid out in the regulations. There is specifics about the prep room. You need to have a room solely dedicated to embalming. It can't be a room that you use for embalming, but then during funerals, you pull everything out and you call it the ladies' restroom, right? Like, no, you can't do that. It's got to be specifically dedicated to that. It has to have walls that go all the way up from bottom to the top. They can't be a divider somewhere. It needs to be one insulated room in that it has walls fully up and down, and it's used solely for that purpose. And then there are certain things you have to have in there. You have to have a certain amount of instruments, and it's all laid out. And it's and if you ever deal with an inspector, they'll lay that out for you. They'll come in, they'll ask you to make sure you have at least one aneurysm hook. They'll make sure that you have at least one drain tube. Even if you don't use a drain tube, you need to have the angular forceps. You need to have everything that is laid out in there, even if you don't use them in every embalming. with prohibitions on that. Question: inspectors are not licensed funeral directors. No, that's correct. They are not, but many times they turn out to be. But I'll talk about that in a bit. Yeah, they're not supposed to be licensed funeral directors, but many times they have been over the years. Prohibitions: you can't have anything in the prep room that's not part of embalming, right? Like I one time almost got popped because a inspector showed up. I had a bunch of chairs that I put in there, funeral home chairs, the fold up chairs. And I had him out looking at records, and I was frantically in the prep room, moving these chairs out the back door, putting them into the garage so that he wouldn't see them. You're not even really supposed to store a stretcher in the prep room. You can bring a body in on it, but it's not supposed to be stored there. You don't need to have, you're only supposed to have things in there that have to do with embalming. All right, so FTC telephone price disclosures. New for 2019, the manager may designate an employee, even if they are unlicensed, to provide price information for the phone. So if you were just reading off of a GPL, you were allowed to give the information. You can specify somebody, even if they're not licensed. Like my wife works at a funeral home. She is not licensed, but they often have her respond to consumers looking for prices. And she just reads off the GPL. If they wanted to, they could make her the designated FTC price person, where you just give off the information on that GPL. You're allowed to do that. You can't sit down and make a set of funeral arrangements, but you're allowed to give that information out. Responding to questions concerning information not on the price list shall be referred to a licensee or intern. And this was new as well, meaning that as an intern, you're allowed to call somebody back and go through price information with them on a much more thorough basis than somebody who's not in the industry can. So multiple ownership disclosure. This is something that goes back about 10, 15 years. If a funeral home has more than 2 locations, they have to disclose that. And this means that, like, I know when this first came out, we had 2 funeral homes, and we thought we were not a part of this because it was we owned a business, and the business entity owned these funeral homes. I owned 40%, my brother owned 40%, my mom owned 20%. We're like, yeah, we got another. No, we were wrong. We were 100% wrong on that. The company itself owns these 3 funeral homes, so therefore we are beholden to it. We need to disclose that. So if you own more than 1 funeral home, you have to disclose that. And the idea is that somebody owns 2 funeral homes in town. They walk into one location, and the family, you say the funeral's going to be $7,000. They go, that's ridiculous. I'm not going to pay more than $6,500. They walk out, they storm out, and they go to the other funeral home. And in the meantime, you call the other funeral home and go, hey, this family's coming in. Don't charge them more than $6,500. So they come in, you charge them $64.99. And they go, that's the perfect amount that I wanted to pay. Boom, done and done. So that's why they make you disclose this. It's kind of a silly thing, but it's just part of the regulations on that. So you have to disclose the name of the funeral home along with the municipality and a description, enough to identify. New for 2019, multiple disclosure ownership only needs to be on the GPL, meaning you don't have to have it on the casket price list. You don't have to have it on the outer burial container price list. You just need it on the GPL. All right, mortuary issues. Previously, this is one of the really weird things about New Jersey law. Mortuary shall not be used as a site for recovering organs or tissues, including DNA. And they were real hardcore about this. People did it a lot, but it was in the books. You were not allowed to do this. They've relaxed that. What they previously said is you could just collect a lock of hair for the family. Now they've opened it up. It can collect a DNA sampling via cheek swab, nail clippings, and or blood collection. And this is sort of the new part right here. They did not allow you to do that for 2019. However, they had always said the funeral home may be the site of examination to determine the cause or manner of death, meaning that you can have a private autopsy done at the funeral home. That's all right. Hold on, Butters. You got that? So you may be the site of the examination to determine cause or manner of death, meaning you can have a private autopsy done at the funeral home. That was never an issue. That's something you've always been allowed to do. Costs an arm and a leg. Yeah, if you want to have a pathologist come in, it costs like $7,000 to do it, but you can do that. All right, so this is a big one that changed last year. Food in the mortuary. Are they out of there? Okay, they're on the other wagon. If anybody ever meets my wife, don't tell her I was vaping in the house, but they're in the other room. So food in the mortuary. Wait, you were never allowed to have food in the mortuary. You could only serve water, even coffee or anything like that. You couldn't serve. In 2019, they changed that. It was overturned and said you may serve and allow food and non-alcoholic beverages to be served, but you cannot prepare them at the funeral home. So even if you live in a funeral home, right? You live upstairs and you have a kitchen, you can't make the food up there. It has to be made somewhere else and brought in, right? It has to be made somewhere else and brought in. But this was a big deal. This was controversial. A lot of people were ticked off about it, saying like, a lot of funeral directors I knew were like, no, I don't want to have food in the funeral home. So I think it's silly. I think it's short-sighted, but that's funeral directors. So if you close a funeral home, so again, this is just new for 2019. If you close a funeral home, and this is a good thing to look up, look at the regulation on this. What do you need to do if you close a funeral home? You must show evidence to the state board that EDRS the account has been closed. You must inform the state board of the location and individual in charge of the funeral home records, meaning you have to hand them off to someone. And you must keep the funeral home records for 7 years. And again, just like the current records with an active funeral home, first year must be available immediately, with the other 6 years within 2 weeks. So there's a 7-year rule on that. So interns and intern regulations, preceptor qualifications. Again, you have to be licensed at least 2 years. How many interns? A funeral home can have 2, and that's it. And this is a silly rule. A funeral home can be doing 3,000 calls a year and only have 2, which is silly. They could be doing 300 calls a year and only have 2, which is actually, no, it's a little more than that. Let's say actually, no, that is right. 300 calls a year, you can have 2. Intern specifics, time. Yes, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Sheed.
Professor, I read the regs, and I just to let you know there's a clause in there now that if a funeral home writes to the state board requesting a 3rd intern, as long as it's in the interest of the consumer, that's the terms, the state board would grant a 3rd intern.
Where did you read that? Because I haven't heard anything about.
I'll pull it up in the regs, but when I was reading the 99 pages, I took notes on that, and I'll let you know where it's at.
Yeah, take a look and shoot that over to me. If something like that has gone through, it's news to me. That's always been the 2 intern rule, which is dumb if you ask me. Now, during COVID, things have changed a lot. So it could be a situation like that. And if so, great. But I've been reading the state board meetings. I haven't seen anything like that. But if you've come across something like that, shoot it over to me. I'm happy to take a look on it. Now, if they've made a change like that recently, you're probably not going to see a question on it because the change is so recent. But again, they changed the date of the test and never told me. And so it wouldn't be out of the range of possibility for something like that to have happened, because they are not, as much as I get along great with Cindy at the state board, they just do not communicate to me. I mean, I was really working on the premise that the test was going to be on the 3rd Friday, as it has been for the past 30 years. Up until a couple of weeks ago when I found out, and I was like, my God, so anyway, the standard rule is 2 interns per funeral home. And what they base that off of, even one, if you have 1 intern, what it comes down to is you're allowed to have an intern if you have at least 25 cases a year. And that is not including stillbirths and stillborns and children that died before they were born. And the idea behind that is that the internship can be 3 years long. Now, if you are at a funeral home and you are doing all 3 years there, right? You're doing 60 credits plus funeral service education. So you're there for 3 years. And if you do every case that comes down the pike, that means you can hit the 75 total that they need, the 75 embalmings and 75 funerals. So yeah, that's where that number comes from. Intern specifics, time, cases, and background. Again, this goes back to that idea of 75, 75, and 25. During your internship, you have to do 75 funerals, 75 embalmings, and 25 sets of funeral arrangements. 25 sets of funeral arrangements are relatively new. That's within the past 10 years. And the background question being that before you do funeral service education, they need you to do 60 credits of college classes. They don't care what it's in, just so long as it exists. It's you could study basket weaving for 2 years and they're fine with that. Now, given the program, my program, other programs, they all have their prerequisites, but as far as the state board is concerned, they just want you to have 60 credits. Internship extension. No, it's not uncommon for somebody to need an internship extension. You get to that 3-year point and you don't have all the requirements, and they will normally give you 3 to 6 months to finish that up. If you fail the state board practical exam, right, when they come out to watch you embalm someone, you have to wait at least 30 days. You have to reapply. You have to reapply, pay the fees again, and then you can reschedule it. Now, a concurrent intern. So if you think of, and again, my terrible drawings. If you think of the whole of the internship as 3 years, right? The first 2 years, you get 60 credits, right? I'm going to write 60 CR, right? Okay. So it's 60 credits, right? You get done school, high school or something or whatever, and you haven't done any college. During that 60 credits, this is the concurrent period. Now this last, which is normally 38, 39 credits, is funeral service ed, right? Now the concurrent period is just during that first 60 credits. You're allowed to do the internship during that time, but it's and you can rack up 75, 75, and 25 and everything else that is involved with that. But the actual internship itself, when you're in this last portion of it, the funeral service ed, that's not actually a concurrent internship. It's just when, it's just while you're doing the funeral service ed. So it's a weird distinction to make, but if you see questions geared at that, asking about the concurrent, and again, I apologize. It is my writing is terrible on that. I didn't even put a T on there. Right? I didn't put an N on there either. I'm sorry, I've got mayhem going on at this place. Yes, I know. But that is the concurrent internship, is that first 60 credits. So, all right, so look, let's wrap up here. I'm going to do the same thing on Monday night. I've given you guys a link that goes through everything else. But again, my apologies on this. This was a screw up on my part. I did not realize we had back to school night tonight. I needed to meet my daughter's teacher. And we have a sitter here and everything else. So that was an absolute screw up on my part. But from a theoretical standpoint, you can watch the video that I posted, that you can see everything else I'm going to go through tonight with a different group of people. But I will pick up on Monday night again at 6 p.m. I will go through the rest of this. Does anybody have any questions beforehand?
Oh, Professor, I misspoke. I pulled it up. So basically, you know how you can have 3 funeral establishments in one funeral home?
Mhm.
So it says no more than 3 funeral establishments shall operate in one facility unless the board find in its discretion to find permitting additional establishment for the best interest of the consumers. So that's what it was for. So a funeral home could possibly have a 4th registration out of it if it's in the best interest of the consumers.
I got you. And a lot of times what happens is, and where that comes from is, let's say that you've got 3 funeral homes operating, and it's not uncommon. It happens. You've got 3 funeral homes operating in one building. They're competitors down the street and the building burns down. They reach out to the state board and go, hey, look, like this is our competitor, but they're still our friend. Can we have them operate out of our building while they're rebuilding their place? And the state board goes, all right, that's in the consumer's best interest. That's fine. Go ahead. That's fine. So that's really where that comes from. But again, Shahid, it would not surprise me if the state board had changed that, because they do this wacky stuff all the time and they don't tell us anything. I read the meetings every month and they do stuff like this all the time. And it slips by us on a regular basis. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, like I said, I'm going to end this, but I'm going to put this. What happens is this downloads to my computer. I'm going to put it up onto YouTube either later tonight or tomorrow. I'm going to pick up where we were on Monday. And again, my apologies for breaking it up, but I'll put up, and I'll tell you what, I'll even put up in that video, in the description of it, I'll put up a video of me doing the whole thing. So if you want to watch the whole thing, you can. And I'll pick up on Monday. It was just, I screwed up and did not realize that we had back to school night tonight, the parent teacher conference thing. So I know, Jen, I know we got to go. So, in the meantime, anybody has any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. Otherwise, I'll pick up on this on Monday. And like I said, you can see the full video of a previous class where I've gone through the entire thing, and you're welcome to download any of it and watch it. But I will pick this up and actively do this again on Monday at 6. So are there any questions for a wrap up? All right. Again, guys, my apologies. I wanted to kick myself in the face when I realized that I had screwed this up and scheduled 2 things on the same night. So my apologies to everyone, but like I said, all information should be available to you. And, questions in the meantime, feel free to reach out to me. Otherwise, I'll see everyone Monday at 6 if you choose to join us, but I'll make the full video, a previous video available to you, and I'll make both this and the other video available to you. Okay. All right. Take care, everyone. I hope to see everybody on Monday at 6. Again, my apologies. I really screwed them. I know we gotta go. I'm getting yelled at. Okay. Guys, take care.